A wide variety of winter-like weather is targeted and is occurring in many locations. We'll give you the complete weather details on that. But now, some selected cities and their forecasts.
This is CNN, a service of Turner Broadcasting System.
These 4 men were kidnapped in Beirut yesterday in an effort to halt the extradition of an accused terrorist to the United States. That's what the group claiming responsibility for the kidnappings is now saying. Hello, I'm Steve Schatz. There are now 8 Americans held hostage in Beirut. 3 more were added to the list yesterday when they were among 4 college professors abducted at gunpoint from a Beirut university. A group calling itself the Organization of the Oppressed on Earth is claiming responsibility now. CNN's Chet Burgess narrates this report.
The kidnappings took place yesterday at an American-operated university in West Beirut. 4 gunmen, disguised as police officers, told the professors they had been assigned to protect them. The newest hostages are identified as Jesse Turner, Alan Steen, Robert Polhill, and Mittaleshwar Singh. The Indian educator is described as a legal resident alien in the United States. The Voice of Lebanon radio says a phone call received today contained a threat against the hostages. The caller said one would be killed if suspected hijacker Mohammed Ali Hamadi is extradited from West Germany to the United States.
Well, I think the terrorists are upping the ante at this point. They're extorting both the West German government and now the United States government. I think a lot has to do with our history of making trades secretly with Iran for not only hostages, but arms for hostages.
The American State Department is strongly condemning the latest kidnappings in Beirut.
And that we consider all of Lebanon to be unsafe for Americans in this difficult time.
President Reagan had no comment on the latest kidnappings when he returned to the White House today, but a spokesman says the president is concerned and holds the individuals who took the hostages responsible for their safety and immediate release.
But what we should do, in my view, is do exactly what we did in Libya, where we very strongly urged every American to get out and warned every American we could not protect them if they stayed. And I think it's that kind of notification that we should put into effect.
The abductions took place while Anglican Church envoy Terry Waite remains underground in Beirut, trying to win the release of other captives. Waite has not been seen since last Tuesday, but a church spokeswoman says he is safe and continuing his humanitarian effort. However, since Waite began his current mission, 10 people have been kidnapped in Beirut.
I think it means we're on a treadmill, that even if we succeeded in getting some sort of a dramatic hostage release, which for humanitarian reasons would be wonderful, other hostages will be taken. We have not solved this problem.
I think that somewhere along the line, there has to be recognition that we got to dig in our heels, that this is crime, and we ought not dignify it as war per se. We went through a lot of trouble to come up with a law that would give us extraterritorial authority. Now's the time to just dig in. We're going to take our lumps.
Students at Beirut University College say they'll begin a strike tomorrow to protest the abductions of their teachers. Chet Burgess, CNN, reporting.
Former hostage Benjamin Weir says news of the Iran arms deal was a major setback for the hostages in Lebanon. The minister was held captive for 16 months by the Islamic Jihad. He was freed shortly after one of the first shipments of U.S. arms to Iran. In New Haven, Connecticut last night, Weir was asked what he feels is the best way to win the release of the hostages.
I think it is through direct negotiation with the captors. For a long time, I have wished that the administration would themselves provide someone. Mr. Waite has been very persistent and has been able to establish confidence in talking with the captors. I think there are probably other routes, too, that our administration needs to pursue.
Weir also says he feels the U.S. should continue to negotiate with Iran, but should not make arms shipments part of any deal. The issue of West German hostages being held in Lebanon was not a focal point during the national campaign in West Germany, and it is not expected to affect the outcome of today's elections. At this hour, the polls are beginning to close, and conservative Chancellor Helmut Kohl is expected to win another 4 years in office. The major question at hand is whether Kohl's Christian Democrats will win enough votes to govern without their current coalition partner. The shooting deaths of at least a dozen demonstrators in the Philippines last week is causing more trouble for the Aquino government. It was reported today that the president and most of the members of Aquino's Committee on Human Rights have resigned in protest over that incident. Yesterday, President Aquino addressed a crowd of some 20,000 supporters in the central Philippines. She told them that she would seek justice for the families of those who were shot during the protest. She has also agreed to meet with the leftist leaders who organized the land reform protest. In this country, civil rights marchers in Forsyth County, Georgia, were 25,000 strong yesterday. Security forces called in to control the crowds kept injuries and outbursts of violence to a minimum. CNN's Ed Garston was there, and he files this report.
Members of the National Guard began laying in supplies early in the morning, getting ready for a long day. Meanwhile, a caravan of at least 200 police cars rolled into town. The show of force was a result of a lesson learned the hard way. When Klan members and supporters vastly outnumbered police at last week's march, they took advantage and pelted the marchers with rocks and mud. But on this day, a massive force of the Guard and state and local police, almost 2,400 in all, formed a human wall of security for the marchers.
I am very, very pleased. It was a peaceful demonstration and allowed each individual to exercise their rights guaranteed by the Constitution.
But despite the uniformed flanks, at least 3 missiles, mostly rocks and bottles, were thrown into the endless line. 1 woman was hurt. There were arrests, mostly on minor disturbance charges. A white power leader is charged with spurring on one of those disturbances. David Duke, leader of the National Association for the Advancement of White People, was arrested after leading a rally before the marchers arrived. That was the biggest show of strength of the so-called white power movement. Evidently heeding the wishes of their leaders, only a few robed members of the Ku Klux Klan showed up. They left peacefully soon after the marchers left downtown, a relief for weary law enforcement troops.
Long day. While the virtual army of bodyguards kept the violence to a minimum, one law enforcement official said, it sure helped to have last week as a preview. Ed Garston, CNN, Cumming, Georgia.
In the wake of yesterday's protest, black leaders are split over its impact on racism in America. 2 of them spoke out on the subject this morning on CNN's Newsmaker Sunday.
The scars and stain of racism in America are very deep. They're deeply embedded in our society, not just in the South, but throughout this country. And it's going to take both the private sector and the public sector and men and women of goodwill to remove the scars and the stings of racism from our society.
We cannot protest our way into prosperity. We as blacks must call for a national black self-help renaissance where we look to our own resources to help ourselves and concern ourselves less with what a national administration does. And I think that's misguided thinking and misguided policies.
Newsmaker Sunday will be shown again at 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time. The memory of 10 astronauts who died in space-related accidents over the past 20 years lives on. California's Civil Air Patrol held a memorial service yesterday for the space heroes. The ceremony honored the 7 crew members of the Space Shuttle Challenger killed when the shuttle exploded a year ago. Also remembered were the 3 Apollo 1 astronauts who died in a fire during a ground test nearly 20 years ago. About 200 people attended the service in Hollywood. Michelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, paid tribute to the astronauts by reading from a poem entitled High Flight.
I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark nor even eagle flew. And while silent, lifting mind, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God.
Just a few moments. Now some specific forecasts.
This is CNN, a service of Turner Broadcasting System.
Civil rights leaders say the march in Forsyth County yesterday was a big success. Hello, I'm Donna Kelley. I'll have more on the Brotherhood March later in this newscast. But first, A Shiite Muslim group says it will kill one of its 3 American hostages if its demands are not met by midnight tonight. The Organization of the Oppressed on Earth wants West Germany to release a man wanted by the United States for a 1985 hijacking. The group claims responsibility for yesterday's kidnapping of 3 Americans and 1 Indian from the Beirut University College. The hostages, all professors, were taken from the school at gunpoint by men dressed as police officers. The captives are identified as Jesse Jonathan Turner, Alan Steen, Robert Paul Hill, and Mateleshwar Singh. Singh has resident alien status in the United States. The men had stayed in Beirut with their families despite repeated warnings of possible danger because they were Americans. Friends of Turner say he took the job in Beirut because he disagreed with American foreign policy. Steen is an ex-Marine who reportedly slept with a pistol by his bed, and he liked the excitement of living in the war-torn city. In an interview in 1985, Steen said the danger is stimulating, and in his words, there's a feeling it could be me. A former hostage in Lebanon says the 4 men seized Saturday were, in his words, foolish for still being in Beirut. David Jacobson, freed last November 2nd, says he thought all Americans had cleared out of West Beirut. Jacobson expressed shock at the kidnappings. The Civil Rights March that drew nearly 25,000 demonstrators to Forsyth County, Georgia yesterday has focused new attention on the civil rights movement. The marchers converged on the all-white county yesterday after a Brotherhood march last week was disrupted by rock-throwing Klansmen. We have 2 reports on yesterday's relatively peaceful demonstration. We go first to Tom Mintier.
The rally in Forsyth County, Georgia will certainly have its place in history.
Ain't gonna let no racist white folks turn me around. We gonna...
Maybe as one of the largest and most important civil rights marches put together in the shortest time, just a week. They came from all over the United States. March organizers say they started with 100 buses, but say it took 500 in the end, and nearly 4,000 people were left behind in Atlanta. Unlike last Saturday, when the Brotherhood March was staged on a remote county highway with limited police protection, the event this time was center stage. The security for the march was massive.
Oh, move it! Move it! One side or the other, let's go!
1,500 Georgia National Guardsmen lined the entire route. Dressed in full riot gear, they carried no weapons, but police sharpshooters could be seen on rooftops and anywhere there were trees. The massive show of force was designed to prevent anyone from even thinking they could start some trouble. But with emotions as strong as they are here, trouble came despite all the precautions. When the rally reached the courthouse in Cumming, the county seat, it filled the entire block and then some. For more than an hour, civil rights leaders, both from the past and present, told the crowd that the battle for freedom wasn't over yet. March organizer Hosea Williams says the marchers' presence in Forsyth County shows Martin Luther King's dream still lives.
We have come to Forsyth County today to inform that Ku Klux Klan mentality, not only here in Forsyth County, Georgia, but throughout America. Not only will we not let them kill that dream, we're not going to let nobody turn the dream into a nightmare.
We come to say today that we're going to make a new South. We're not going back. We've come too far. They think the big ball game is tomorrow. This is the real game. This is the Super Bowl that God is about.
For the civil rights movement, this event was indeed as important as the Super Bowl is to football. In a county that blacks until Saturday feared even to enter, the march may have been a great victory.
While most are calling the march in Forsyth a huge success, the true test will not come today. It will come tomorrow, next week, and maybe next year, when the National Guardsmen and the state police are no longer needed. Tom Mintier, CNN, Forsyth County, Georgia.
Forsyth County, have you heard? Forsyth County, have you heard? This is not Johannesburg. This is not Johannesburg.
They have taken to the streets again because they say they have to. For the most part, they are the sons and daughters of the 50s and 60s, and they came from all across America to join in this rejuvenation of a civil rights movement that had all but sputtered to a halt. Some of the differences between the old marchers and the new were as glaring as the watchful eye of the ever-present Ku Klux Klan. More white middle-class Americans like Greg Hendelman of California have joined the ranks to protest racism wherever it raises its ugly head.
It's just too much, and it's time that people come out in full force and say that Americans don't want it that way.
2 decades ago, state troopers were dispatched to quash civil rights demonstrations. Today, they are on the line to protect them. And this new generation of marcher is not opposed to exposing their children to what they firmly believe in. But neither is the other side, where convictions often start in a mother's arms. We were even surprised why senior citizens dotted the ranks. So we asked.
Because I've been believing in this for 70 years.
25 years ago, marchers facing an angry town square would not have dreamed of raising their hands in symbolic gesture. Now they do. And in some small quarter, the message is returned. And who would have thought the punk generation would trade their loud music for the nastiness of the good old boys? To be sure, not all of the new protesters are rookies. Some of the old hands are still around, but now it's left for them to make speeches and mediate the battles. And in tiny Forsyth County, there are surely to be more confrontations, like the most recent one. But a message went out here that clearly was intended for a larger audience. And that message seemed to say, a new generation stands ready to challenge bigotry and prejudice wherever it can. Larry Woods, CNN, in Forsyth County, Georgia.
Some black leaders are arguing about whether yesterday's march was really necessary. The Reverend Joseph Lowry of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference says racism is still pervasive in America. He said the march helped focus on the fact that the civil rights struggle still has a long way to go.
Forsyth County, Cumming, Georgia, Howard Beach, New York, are not just places, they're attitudes. They are philosophies, they are policies of exclusion. Excluding blacks in Forsyth County, for example, the unemployment rate is half, at least half of the national rate. Blacks are excluded from that county just as blacks are excluded from full employment and employment opportunities in this country.
But Robert Woodson, a black conservative, says the march does not address issues facing blacks today.
As a person who marched in the 60s, the civil rights movement, I think that the tactics of today have to address today's problems. And I think what we're witnessing in Howard Beach and in Forsyth County are acts of individual racism not supported by the government of those counties or in New York. In the 60s, they were supported. And the purpose of the 60s demonstrations was precisely to change the laws so that we could vote. It had a purpose.
Both men were speaking today on CNN's Newsmaker Sunday. That program airs again at 5:30 Eastern Time today. Hope you'll stay with us. We have a complete sports report just ahead, including a live report from Terry Chick in Pasadena.
For everybody who loves waltzes, here is the famous orchestra whose waltz records became giant.
What's that number? 1-800-525-4000.
This is CNN, a service of Turner Broadcasting System.
Hello, I'm Donna Kelley with a quick look at the top stories this hour. The kidnappers of 3 Americans in Beirut have set a deadline for 2 hours from now. They say they will execute one of the hostages if West Germany does not free a Palestinian man accused in the 1985 hijacking of a TWA jet to Beirut. The Voice of Lebanon Radio says it received that threat in a phone call. The caller said he was from the Organization of the Oppressed on Earth, and we should note that this radio station has been unreliable in the past. The Americans were abducted yesterday at a college in West Beirut. Gunmen dressed as police officers grabbed 4 men who taught at the school. 3 of the teachers are Americans, the other is an Indian. The wives of the newest hostages have issued an appeal for their release. A terrorism expert says these latest abductions can be tied to the U.S. arms for hostages deal with Iran.
They're upping the ante at this point. They're extorting both the West German government and now the United States government. I think a lot has to do with our history of making trade secretly with Iran for not only hostages, but arms for hostages.
4 other people have also been kidnapped in Beirut in the past week, including 2 West Germans. It does not appear the hostage crisis had any effect on today's national elections in West Germany. The voters have returned Chancellor Helmut Kohl for another 4-year term. But early ballots show a decline in the popularity for the 2 main members of Kohl's coalition government. The Christian Democrats and a sister party lost about 5% of the votes they had in the last election. That could mean a loss of as many as 28 seats in the lower house of parliament. The anti-nuclear Greens party was able to pick up 2 more seats for a total of 9. In the Persian Gulf War between Iran and Iraq, the rhetoric is flying almost as fast as the missiles. Iran is claiming victory over its neighbor is near, but Iraq says Iranian troops around the southern city of Basra are besieged. Both sides continued their bombing of each other's cities. Iraqi warplanes attacked 2 Iranian cities today, including the holy city of Qum, just south of Tehran. Meanwhile, Iran is claiming missile strikes today on 2 Iraqi cities. It also says it shot down 7 Iraqi planes yesterday. The 2 countries have been at war since 1980. The Brotherhood March in Forsyth County, Georgia may be over, but how much has really changed? That is the question black leaders are asking themselves today. More than 2,200 National Guardsmen and police were needed to keep peace, and some 60 people were arrested, most of them from the white counter demonstration. 2 black leaders offered several courses of action today on CNN's Newsmaker Sunday.
The scars and stain of racism in America are very deep. They're deeply embedded in our society, not just in the South, but throughout this country. And they're going to take both the private sector and the public sector and men and women of goodwill to remove the scars and the stings of racism from our society.
We cannot protest our way into prosperity. We as blacks must call for a national black self-help renaissance where we look to our own resources to help ourselves and concern ourselves less with what a national administration does. And I think that's misguided thinking and misguided policies.
You can see the entire program of Newsmaker Sunday in 2.5 hours, 5:30 Eastern Time, right here on CNN. It is the big day, the big game out in sunny Pasadena, California, Super Bowl 21, pitting the New York Giants against the Denver Broncos. Kickoff in a few hours, and the Giants are favored to win by more than a touchdown. As we look at the top stories, I'm Donna Kelley. Stay tuned for Larry King Weekend. Larry's guest is Hollywood star Jack Lemmon.
Welcome to Larry King Live, Weekend Edition. 2-time Academy Award winner Jack Lemmon has never had any difficulty achieving critical acclaim. But sand traps are another matter. Now, here's Larry King.
An hour tonight in Los Angeles with Jack Lemmon. Your
important guaranteed life insurance plan. Call right now, 1-800-445-5700. Operators are standing by.
Iranian Muslim group has claimed responsibility for the kidnapping of 3 Americans and an Indian who has resident alien status in the United States. The 4 were taken hostage yesterday by gunmen posing as their police protectors. The Voice of Lebanon radio said an anonymous caller claiming to represent a group named the Oppressed on Earth said the teachers were kidnapped to prevent the extradition of a hijack suspect to the U.S. The caller also said that one of the men would be killed if the suspect, Mohammed Ali Hamadi, is not released from West German custody. The Reagan administration has condemned the kidnapping and has called on the immediate release for the hostages. But as CNN's Bob Franken reports, many in the nation's capital are saying stronger steps need to be taken, and soon.
Long-simmering frustration over the taking of American hostages heated up with the mad as hell and not going to take it anymore reaction to the latest kidnappings in Beirut. There were several calls for U.S. retaliation, even military action. As a consultant to the National Security Council, Michael Ledeen took part in some of the Reagan administration's first contacts with Iranian representatives. Ledeen says he would target both terrorists and their sponsoring countries for what he described as a full range of actions.
Arresting individuals or going after individuals and bringing them back here to face justice. If that turns out to be impossible, whatever means are necessary to deliver a blow to them. And if it's a country sponsoring terrorism, the full range from diplomatic slaps on the wrist all the way to military action.
The country most closely linked to Lebanese hostage-taking is Iran, where there has been no American retaliation. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger said that Iran might be an acceptable target.
Military action, in the end, would be appropriate. But I don't think it should be taken for domestic American political reasons. It should be taken carefully, cold-bloodedly, but frankly also inexorably.
But Senator Claiborne Pell, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, urged that military action only be a last resort.
Sometimes economic action can be more painful than a physical action. But if physical action is necessary, provided all the bases have been touched and everybody's informed, I could see it being taken.
Military action carries the potential for huge consequences, but there appears to be growing sentiment for a tougher policy in an effort to come up with the effective response to terrorism that has so far eluded this country. Bob Franken, CNN, Washington.
The Church of England says today that envoy Terry Waite is in good health and is still negotiating for the release of Western hostages in Beirut. A spokesperson for the Archbishop of Canterbury says he expects to hear from Waite later in the day. Waite has not been seen since Tuesday. It is the first time he has gone underground for so long. Since Waite arrived in Beirut to begin his latest mission, 9 Westerners have been kidnapped. Reports today indicate the West German government is continuing its efforts to free the West German hostages seized in Lebanon. One German newspaper reports that a mediator from Lebanon will be arriving in Bonn to discuss the situation, but German government officials refuse to confirm the report. West German officials believe that Rudolf Kords and Alfred Schmidt were abducted by the brother of Mohammed Ali Hamadi. This hostage crisis is apparently not being blamed on West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Based on early computer projections from the national elections, voters today returned Kohl's conservative coalition to power. However, his Christian Democratic Party did lose some support compared to the last national elections 4 years ago. Kohl blamed some of the lost votes on the rainy, cold weather, which kept voter turnout low. South African police today arrested Winnie Mandela, wife of jailed African National Congress leader Nelson Mandela. Mandela's lawyer says she was arrested at her home in Soweto after more than a dozen policemen searched her house for several hours. Police also arrested Mandela's daughter and about 20 young black boys who were playing in the Mandela yard. The government is not commenting on the arrests. Snow is falling on snow here in Washington and in the points south and east. Days after a major snowstorm, winter is not giving the area a break. We'll have that story coming up.
In case you haven't heard, there's a great tasting microwave rice around too.
Mention decaffeinated coffee to a lot of coffee drinkers, and this can happen. To them, decaffeinated just doesn't have enough flavor, enough aroma. But now there's new Brim. It's aroma blended to give you a rich aroma, a full-bodied flavor. So for some people, it's new Brim or nothing. Brim? Brim? Uh-huh. Oh. Brim? What do you think? Fill it to the rim with new Brim.
Even if you aren't an investor, the stock market can affect your business. So subscribe to the Wall Street Journal and profit from the market without investing anything more than the cost of a newspaper.
Call 800-334-6600 for this special introductory offer. 13 weeks for just $29.75 with a money-back guarantee. 13 weeks, $29.75. Phone 800-334-6600 now for the Wall Street Journal.
Mary Rogers' eyes, sparkling blue. Nearsighted. Comfortable in color-accented frames and lightweight plastic lenses with a soft tint. Mary Rogers' eyes, corrected, beautiful, and in love. Pearl knows how glasses work. Pearl cares how glasses look. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Is your breath a little strong? Then have a Milk-Bone dog biscuit to help scrape away plaque and food particles to give you cleaner teeth, fresher breath. Get Milk-Bone because, naturally, every dog wants fresher breath.
Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North reportedly said that President Reagan's primary objective in selling arms to Iran seemed to be freeing the American hostages in Lebanon. The Washington Post today reports this based on notes from the Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation. Those notes apparently reveal that North communicated the president's preoccupation with the hostages to Attorney General Edwin Meese during a November interview. North said that while presidential advisors were talking of the broader goal of reaching Iranian moderates, President Reagan kept steering the conversation back to freeing the hostages. President Reagan probably will not say much about the Iran-Contra affair in his State of the Union address to Congress this Tuesday. The president is back at the White House, returning early from Camp David today, putting the finishing touches on his speech. Because of the snow, he traveled back to Washington by limousine rather than his usual helicopter. The president said yesterday that his speech will focus on the historic themes of liberty, economic growth, and the national security. He is expected to request that defense spending stay steady and that the United States continue to fund the Nicaraguan Contras. CNN, of course, will be carrying the President's State of the Union address live this Tuesday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Just 2 days after 10 inches of snow crippled the nation's capital, Washington is smack dab in the middle of another winter storm. This is what it looks like now, snow falling heavily in the 6-degree wind-chilled air. Much of the snow from the last storm is still on the ground or has turned to ice on the roads. Another 5 to 10 inches will fall, we're told. A low-pressure system also is bringing freezing rain, some sleet and snow across the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. Winter storm warnings are in effect from North Carolina to Delaware. What did 20,000 demonstrators achieve by marching in an all-white county in Georgia? That's the question civil rights leaders are trying to answer today after yesterday's march in Forsyth County. Some leaders, such as the Reverend Joseph Lowry, told the demonstrators they were ushering in a new era.
We come to say today that we're going to make a new South. We're not going back. We've come too far.
More than 2,200 National Guardsmen and state police were needed to escort the marchers in a county where blacks were chased out entirely 75 years ago. Other civil rights leaders, such as Robert Woodson, says marches like this aren't the right way to turn around centuries of racism.
As a person who marched in the 60s, the civil rights movement, I think that the tactics of today have to address today's problems. And I think what we're witnessing in Howard Beach and in Forsyth County are acts of individual racism not supported by the government of those counties or